think when we've had a good day, it's those small victories. When someone walks in, I mean, my third day here, I spent 5-6 hours talking to social services and had to run up all the way up the flagpole, but I was able to get somebody who just got out of treatment housed. And, a good day is when I can walk home and I can go home, spend time with my partner, spend time with my kids, and I can know that we've seen people housed.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to Chris Randall. He is the featured guest in episode 10, season 2 of YXE Underground. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected all of us here in Saskatoon in so many different ways. For our city's homeless population, the pandemic has made life even more challenging. Services have been reduced, shelters have had to limit their beds. The issue of affordable housing is top of mind for many people in our city, and that's why the work that Chris Randall is doing to help homeless people is so important. We'll meet Chris in this episode of YXE Underground. First of all, I hope all of you are doing well, that you're staying safe and healthy, that you're washing your hands lots. I hope you're doing mentally well as well. I don't know about you, but I found the last few weeks just to be kind of a challenge in terms of it's hitting me that this is what life is going to be like for the foreseeable future, and I kind of miss my old life a little bit, my life from 4 months ago. But then I meet a guy like Chris Randall, and I can't help but feel inspired by his passion and dedication to his community, and especially his empathy. For years, Chris has been a strong voice for affordable housing in Saskatoon. He was working at Saskatoon Housing Partnership when the pandemic started, but is now the support program manager at the FASD network of Saskatchewan. When COVID-19 arrived in Saskatoon in March, there was a lot of energy focused on hospitals and acute care services, and rightly so. But I was struck by a few news stories looking at how vulnerable our city's homeless population was to the virus and how the services they relied on were shutting down because of COVID-19. Chris knew right away that the people he's been working with for years were going to need a lot of help, and that it would take people from all sectors of the nonprofit and support services community to deliver that help. He was instrumental in creating 2 hubs, one at the Salvation Army Temple off of 8th Street and the other at White Buffalo Youth Lodge, which is where I'm standing right now. These hubs are home to many organizations like Out Saskatoon and Aid Saskatoon that are helping people get through this very challenging time. I wanted to learn more about these hubs and how Chris was able to work with so many people to create them. So I met him on a sunny Saturday morning earlier this month, and we went for a walk through Riversdale. I started by asking Chris if he could take me back to the days before the pandemic started and how he was able to transition so quickly to this new reality.
So the transition happened pretty quickly. I was working at Saskatoon Housing Partnership and had began to work on the point-in-time count. So that's a homeless count that's actually coordinated across Canada and sort of implemented by the federal government for 61 communities to do a count across Canada of homelessness in our urban communities. And so I was working on that. I've worked in the homeless sector in several different roles over the last couple of years, working on that. And really quickly the conversation when this all started, I think 7-8 weeks ago, was, how do we, can we continue this work? How do we serve the community that's needed? And really quickly, a group of us came together and started discussing what needed to happen in light of, COVID-19 and the issues around that and our concerns about how it would affect the most vulnerable in our community.
So when you say a group came together, who was in the group, and then was it just as simple as did someone send a text to one another, or how did you recognize okay, we've got to get on this right away?
Sure. So I work in the homeless serving sector, homeless and housing serving sector, affordable housing and homelessness. A lot of us are very well connected to each other. A lot of us, are friends with each other and connect, whether we're within the same agency or work in multiple multiple different agencies across the community, and really quickly, we discussed sort of facets of our work and how we can move different things forward. The piece that I was working on with the count actually requires partnership from just about every homeless serving agency in the community. A lot of the agencies that work with people who are homeless or vulnerable to homelessness were on committees as we were working towards organizing this count 2 years ago when we did it. I think we had just over 30 agencies participate, and we had determined that there was 475 individuals in our community who were homeless at that point in time. And so we I think initially it just started with like text messages. Hey, you hear what's going on? You hear about, what is this going to mean? It's not like we have, the knowledge that we have now, where we started to see the shutdowns and, the social distancing. We were starting to hear some of that. I think a big thing for me was, hearing in the news when the Prime Minister got off the plane that one day, I think 8 weeks ago, and announced that he was going into social isolation. I was like, wow, this is a significant thing, because I'd heard a couple things about COVID and the coronavirus, but you never really know how big of a situation things are going to be. And then the NBA lockdown, I remember hearing that on the radio. And so, we're texting friends and we're talking to people, and we're discussing what it's going to mean for the work that we're doing and for the community that we serve. And so as we started to have those conversations, things ratcheted up really quickly in terms of what we're hearing from different levels of government about the need to social isolate and potential lockdowns happening, across, the country and things like that. And so we started to discuss what that would mean for the homeless community and for those who are at risk of homelessness in Saskatoon. And so initially those conversations were very much by text message, and then it became a little bit more coordinated with like an official sort of facilitation. And I definitely don't claim to have led all that, but because I was very much invested in a project that was looking to count homelessness in Saskatoon, and very, very early on realized that just simply could not continue. I offered to step into the role of coordinating the launch of 2 hubs, as it was at that point, one at White Buffalo Youth Lodge, and then one over at the Salvation Army Temple off of 8th Street on Bateman Crescent. And the goal there was, as people needed housing or help with homelessness or help with income assistance, needed advocacy work and all sorts of things like that, that we could have a hub that was open to them. We really quickly learned that social services shut down its main office. They just reopened that about a week ago, so there was about 6 weeks where we were it. If you needed help with housing in our community, if you were homeless on the street, you could go to a shelter, but if you needed help getting income assistance, if you were released from hospital or jail or incarceration or anything like that, or were new to the community, the normal supports that were in place just simply weren't there. And then also to sort of limit the spread of the virus, a lot of the community agencies felt like the most responsible thing was to shut their doors. And so really in agreeing with that, where are the community that we serve? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to get their needs met? And so we really, start talking, and what began as a group of probably 5 or 6 of us, texting and calling each other, really quickly morphed into, about a week or 10 days into it, a Zoom call with over 90 individuals represented from community agencies across Saskatoon.
You went from 3 to 4 to 90
Yes.
in this. Wow. So what I'm just thinking. Yeah, which way should we go? We're going this way. Okay. So I think you just did a wonderful job of illustrating how quickly things happened, not only in Canada but North America, but then locally too. But then too, like how quickly you guys had to identify what was needed in your community, what skills you could bring to it. So you mentioned 475
Yes.
homeless people. Can you explain, Chris, then what did those 475 people need that you could help provide?
For sure. So, I mean, needs vary, and they vary by situation. Homelessness isn't something where it's a one-size-fits-all situation that people experience. And everything from when we done our count 2 years ago, we were really able to dig into what homelessness looked like in our community, the high numbers of Indigenous homelessness, and why that was with some of the colonial history and things like that, and then break down with children, breakdown of homelessness individuals who are women with children, the breakdown of male homelessness individuals. So we really had a good idea of what that looked like. And then, when we done that work 2 years ago, we really felt like what that work would allow us to do and allow the community of Saskatoon to do would, to me, make decisions around programming that was really evidence-based and say, like, how can we reduce and then end homelessness in Saskatoon? And so that's been a stated goal in Saskatoon for about 3 years now, is that we really are wanting to reduce and end homelessness. And so we have 17 Housing First case managers that work across different agencies in our city that work to house and stabilize whether individuals or families. We've got a great shelter system in our community. We've got really good work being done on the ground, but then with case managers not being able to show up at work at White Buffalo or at the Indian Métis Friendship Center or some of the community agencies because their doors are closing and in response to this current situation. And then with shelters telling us that they'd reduce capacity in order to have social distancing within the shelters, we had to sort of really scramble. There's some days we just really felt like we were flying by the seat of our pants, but we had to scramble and come together and say, okay, we felt like we were doing really good work up until this time. We were seeing homelessness really tackled, and we were seeing, large numbers of individuals and families housed and stabilized for the first time. But then that whole system sort of, I don't want to say it fell apart, but it stopped being able to be active in many of the ways that it was active due to this current scenario around COVID.
Wow. So like, I'm just picturing one of those days where you think you're doing all right, and I can empathize because I work at Sherbrooke, we're a long-term care center.
Yeah.
We just when we were starting to think, okay, we're starting to get into a groove a little bit, and then a change would happen, and then we've got to make a whole bunch of changes. So I can definitely empathize with that. When the hub at White Buffalo first opened, then, and you started to see people, what were you hearing from people in Saskatoon in terms of like the supports that they needed, and when you were talking with them, like what was that like for you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, some of the individuals came in were individuals that I had known in the community and helped serve personally, or some of the different case managers. So to back up a little bit, we had initially 8 case managers working each day at the hub, and they were reallocated from agencies across our city. So very generous for agencies to say, you know what, our doors aren't open, because of what we're hearing, the guidance we're hearing from the government and health authority and things like that. But we want to make sure our staff are still available to serve. And so, we weren't, as coordinating the hub, we're paying staff to be there. People were reallocated from their agencies. Their agencies were continuing to pay them, but to do work that we were now coordinating in the hub.
And what kind of agencies were those people? Like, I know 8 Saskatoon is one, right?
8 Saskatoon, Quint, John Howard, STC, White Buffalo, Salvation Army. I don't want to do a full list because I feel like I would just inevitably miss one or two. But yeah, like there was multiple agencies across our city, and whether it was one individual showing up or a whole team of out Saskatoon, we've had a huge turnout. And, I sent this email. I remember the day I sent it. It was about 2-3 days, because this all happened, incredibly fast. I sent this email about 3 days before and said, on Monday we're opening 2 hubs, and I'd like to ask you to reallocate some of your staff to come work for me at these hubs. And I was like, what chance is this actually going to happen, right? Like, I sent this, to nonprofit sector across our city and thought, well, cross my fingers, maybe I'll get like 2 or 3 people, but right away on Monday, at that point we were opening 2 locations with 8 staff each at each location, and on Monday we were almost full staffed. I think we had 14 people between the 2 locations. And
how did that make you feel?
Really amazing. I mean, I've been around Saskatoon. I know the community. I know the work that's being done. I know how passionate people are, and people do this work because they care about their community. They do this work because they want to see a difference in our community, because they have a desire to see people housed and stabilized and live in a community where everyone's included. And often, homeless people who struggle with homelessness, they've fallen through the cracks really through no fault of their own. And I think anytime you've worked in this community, you see that and you get a passion, and you want to see systems change. You want to see individual circumstances change. And so, it felt really good to see that all come together and come together so quickly.
So then you've got both places staffed, and I sort of interrupted you back there because I was interested, but like when you were talking, especially maybe some of the people that you knew already that were coming to you, like what were they telling you?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a segment of homelessness in our community that looks like people who are what we call hidden homeless. And so hidden homeless doesn't look like someone showing up downtown at a shelter and needing emergency shelter service. Hidden homelessness often looks like single moms and children who are couch surfing in some very vulnerable situations, and go from place to place to place, sometimes for 2 or 3 nights at a time, sometimes just simply 1 night at a time, and using those personal connections and relationships. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities that are built into that whole scenario, but using that, and maybe we should cross because of the traffic here, but and so what we actually started seeing really quickly was people coming to us saying, I've been staying with friends or cousins or family or an individual that I knew that I was able to make an arrangement with, and now because of the fears around the coronavirus and everything, people are kicked me out. And so they weren't staying there, they weren't housed there anyways, they were couch surfing in those locations, but we were seeing a lot of people trickle out onto the street that, were vulnerably housed, and now because of that, people, where they'd made those arrangements, it just simply couldn't continue.
Okay, so you give a really good scenario there where someone has been couch surfing, and then because of fears around COVID-19, they're looking for a place to go. So then they come to you, Chris. They come, and not just you, but other services. Mm-hmm. How do you then set them up to have some success and just to find maybe it's a place to stay tonight or tomorrow night and stuff like that? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so really quickly, I mean, I really appreciate the shelter system we have in our city, but their hands were tied in the fact that they were not able to increase capacity whatsoever. I mean, in the winters, they often do. I'm part of something called the cold weather strategy, where shelters across Salvation Army, the YWCA, the Lighthouse all increase shelter capacity, when it gets to the really frigid temperatures in our community. But in this situation, the safest guidance that shelters were hearing from health officer and things like that was, don't increase capacity. In fact, try to reduce it wherever possible. And so shelters had to, figure out how to set up beds, that could be socially distant from each other, and things like that. And so we really, really quickly found that when people showed up at the hubs, we couldn't do what was commonly done, which was try to arrange for a shelter stay for them, sometimes 3 to 5 nights at a time, and then work towards housing them. That just simply that those shelter stays weren't available. The capacity was eaten up really, really quickly, and so we started to work with, we had a really great team of case managers, housing first case managers that I'd mentioned a couple minutes ago. They came together and said, well, this is what we do best. We house people, and we take people often out of shelter or out of these emergency provision places and work to get them into housing. We don't have the ability to do that, so we're sort of leapfrogging over that and looking to house them directly. And so we were providing, the case managers began to do that work. Now, often the steps required for that is, somebody on assistance. If someone's been hidden homeless, often social services hasn't approved them to be on assistance for whatever reason, and the reasons for that are there's a whole course of reasons why that would happen. It's really individual by individual and case by case. So we began to work with social services. Now, we've had our battles with different levels of government. One thing they were able to do, though, was give us a direct line to a worker who would just simply answer direct calls all day long from the hub. And so we had a direct line to social assistance. That worked really good, and I definitely want to commend the ministry for doing that for us. That worked really well, so that when an individual would come in, if you were homeless and you came in to see me or one of the case managers at the hub, Eric, I could say, what are your needs? Are you on assistance? Let's get you on assistance. I could pick up the phone, call a worker that I knew wasn't going to be, never return my call and not get back to me within days or even weeks, because that person was just simply there to answer the call from the 8 case managers that I was working with on a single day. So that worked really well.
You're listening to episode 10, season 2 of YXC Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. My guest is housing advocate Chris Randall. You can subscribe for free to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. You can also stream this episode on Spotify or on the website at yxcunderground.com. And if you have time, please feel free to leave a review of the podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. You can find YXC Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which is where you'll see some great photos of Chris taken by podcast photographer Janelle Wallace. In the first part of our conversation, you heard Chris go through the details of all that it took to get these 2 hubs up and running to help Saskatoon's homeless population. It amazed me how quickly our community organized to help those in need, but it also meant for some long days for Chris. For 12 years, he has called the Riversdale neighborhood home with his partner and daughters. He's given a lot of himself to help those in need, and that's only been amplified during this pandemic. I started the last part of our conversation by asking Chris if at any time in the last 2 months he has felt overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think, in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of a situation where we're trying to serve the most vulnerable people in our community, in the middle of a time where, things are unknown. They're talking about opening Saskatchewan, I think, starting Monday, or rolling out some of that in the middle of, it all can be overwhelming. I think some of the time, the sort of saving grace on it is the need to get this all up and running and the need to move forward with this work really has meant that I've had to keep my head down and focus on the immediate thing right in front of me, and that maybe is a little bit of a saving grace to sort of stepping back and seeing, oh my God, what's happening, when you start to hear around the world and even other places in the country where there's hot spots. that's a pretty intense thing to have to process. I felt like the first when we first kicked this off, I was going 150%, 200%, doing 14-hour days to try to get the location started, and that wasn't sustainable. And so after about a week, that needed to happen because we were going from zero to launch, incredibly quick. That needed to happen, but then after we launched, and then the second week I did more reasonable, about an 8-hour days that week. But towards the end of the week, I spoke to some of the team and said, I'm going to actually take a long weekend and rest. And I've done community work long enough to know that you don't help anybody by burning yourself out really quickly. And I've encouraged our team to do that. We encourage, we shut down over Easter weekend, and we have been really clear with our team and our teams that are working at the hub that self-care during this time with your family, time for yourself is really important. And that's the case always when you're doing community work. That's your case always when you're working with vulnerable individuals in high need situations, but that much more in the face of a global pandemic.
Is that something that you had to learn the hard way when you first started your career in terms of helping the community?
Yeah, I came out of university very young, very idealistic in my early 20s, and started working youth work and stuff like that in the community. And so, at that point in time, you can run hard and stuff like that. I'm in my mid to late 30s now, so can't do what I did when I was 25 for sure. So, yeah, you learn those things, and yes.
We were talking before we got rolling about your daughter braiding your beard, because for people that like you have a stunning red beard, and so your daughter, I saw some pictures on Facebook.
My mom's Irish heritage for that.
I'm just wondering how important is it to at the end of some of these busy days to go home to your family? How important is that for you?
Super important. I would be able to do what I do without my kids and without my family and without their support. And I love my kids. Like we go out and we bike around the neighborhood and up the trails by the river, and that's my self-care, spending time with my kids and things like that. That's super important to me.
This is it's May 2nd right now. This isn't going away anytime soon, and I'm wondering, from your perspective, what would you like to see maybe in terms of supports as we go into summer now? What do you need, Chris?
Yeah, so I think what we need more access to housing. We need more access to affordable housing. We'd had some conversations with the province where they were looking to provide, Sask Housing and things like that was looking to provide, and we know they have hundreds of vacancies across our city. They literally, in having, I think the number that I was given initially was they have over 200 vacancies across Saskatoon, and we need that to access for access to get people out of homelessness and into housing. We have the supports in place. We have the skill in place where we can house them and we can provide wraparound services. This is what our Housing First team does. We provide those wraparound services, and we house people, and we help, whether it's an individual or a family, we help them stabilize. We take a very client-centered approach. In Housing First, we provide wraparound case management and supports. We do this all well, and we've got a long track record of doing this well. There was always a high need for this to happen, but that much more in the situation that we find ourselves in now. And finding out that there was 230 vacancies across the city in government-owned housing, in social housing in our community, I thought, oh great, we're going to really have an opportunity to get the homeless community into some of these situations. They've literally allocated 10 units for us, and so that's a huge letdown and something that we're very frustrated. Now we're pushing back on that. We've got some support from community agencies are pushing back from that with a bit of a coordinated voice. I think the mayor's office here in Saskatoon, Charlie Clark's office, has been really good in pushing some of that with us. But it's really disappointing that even right now in the middle of a global pandemic, that often their last thought is, what can we do for homeless in Saskatoon? And not only, my focus is here in Saskatoon, but I know this is an issue, Regina, PA, North Battleford, across our province. And hearing some of that, and I don't want to sort of represent myself as being able to speak to some of those scenarios, but they're dealing with very much the same scenarios that we're dealing with, and we've gotta be able to do that. You would think that in the middle of a global pandemic that people would come together. When I hear release plans that focuses on how we're going to make people able to golf and things like that, I get a little bit cynical and say, like, really, that's the focus right now in writing up rules for golfing when we've got people homeless with nowhere to go? And we've got our community agencies stepping up in a way that multiple other communities have really said to me, like, this is amazing, and it's amazing to see this work come together. It's amazing to see what you're doing. We really wish that we could be as coordinated and innovative as you are. And then on the other hand, we have our government provincial government continue to drag its feet in some very real and troubling ways. So
it's hard work what you're doing. And I'm wondering this last question for you, because you've been really generous with your time. It is hard work what you're doing, but how do you know when you've had a good day?
I think when we've had a good day, it's those small victories. When someone walks in, my third day here, I spent 5-6 hours talking to social services and had to run up all the way up the flagpole, but I was able to get somebody who just got out of treatment housed. And a good day is when I can walk home and I can go home, spend time with my partner, spend time with my kids, and I can know that we've seen people housed. And a good day comes down to the individuals, and were we able to help them, were we able to respond to their needs and in an effective way and get them housed and get them stable. And they're just as aware of the situation of the pandemic and the virus and things as you and I are, and have the same fears, but they don't have the same level of support. And I can't put myself in shoes. I'm too privileged to know what it would be like to hear about the virus but not be able to go home at night to the safety of my own, four walls inside my own house and isolate and things like that. And so a good day for me is helping, seeing, because I'm taking more of a coordinator role right now, but seeing our case managers having the numbers that they're housing, the numbers that they're supporting, the numbers that they're moving forward out of homelessness and into a secure place.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your work. And I know it's not just you; it's a whole army of people. Thank you, Chris, so much, and best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks. It's been great having this conversation.
My thanks to Chris Randall for taking the time to appear on the podcast. And if you want to learn more about the work that Chris and his many colleagues are doing, please visit SaskatoonInteragencyResponse.ca. This has been episode 10 of season 2 of YXE Underground. I'm Eric Anderson. I host, edit, and produce this local independent podcast. Subscribe for free to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And you can also stream all episodes on Spotify or on the website yxeunderground.com. You can find YXE Underground on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and that's where you can see some great photos of Chris Randall taken by the fantastic Janelle Wallace. Thank you, Janelle, for sharing your talents with us. I also want to thank my cousin, Andrew Dixon, for creating all the music that you've heard in this episode, and the good folks at Danger Dynamite here in Saskatoon for maintaining the website. That was a really loud motorcycle. There we go. And before I go, I quickly want to give a shout out to Christy and Kyle at the Hollows Restaurant. And the reason why I'm doing that is the Hollows Restaurant announced a few weeks ago that they are closing their doors. And the Hollows holds a special place in my heart because 5 years ago, my wife and I, we got married in our backyard, and then we had the wedding party at the Hollows. And it was one of the best nights of my life. And Kyle and Christy and the entire Hollows crew made us feel so at home. And we've gotten to know them over these last 5 years, and they're just wonderful people. And I'm really going to miss the Hollows a lot. I still think it's the best food you can find anywhere in Canada, but I'll just miss going there. But I'm really excited to see what Kyle and Christy do next. So if you're listening, Kyle and Christy and the entire Hollows crew, congratulations on just an amazing run, and can't wait to see what you do next. I would like to acknowledge that this interview was done on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.